Chapter 4. As the next stage of our journey was to be in the nature of the side trip, we left the main part of our outfit and the next morning proceeded on our way to the small village about 20 miles distant, with only Jess accompanying us. The trail was not of the best and at times was very difficult to follow, as it wound through the dense forests peculiar to that country. We arrived at our destination just before sunset that evening, tired and hungry, as we had pushed on all day with only a short noonday halt for lunch. The country in general was rough and uneven, and the trail seemed practically unused. It was necessary to cut our way through occasional thickets of trailing vines. At each delay Jess seemed impatient. We wondered at this, for he had previously seemed so poised. This was the first and only time during the 3.5 years he was with us that he was not the same cool, collected Jess that started with us. Later, we did not wonder at this unrest in the light of what transpired. We entered the little village of about 200 inhabitants 1/2 hour before sunset, and when it was known that Jess was with us, I believe every villager, old and young, and every pet and domestic animal came to greet us. While we were the object of more or less curiosity, it was immediately noted that Jess was the center of interest, greeted by all with the utmost reverence. After a few moments he said a word to the villagers, and all but a few returned to their usual duties. Jess turned to us and asked if we wished to go with him. While the camp was being prepared for the night, 5 of our party said they were tired after their day's journey and wished to rest. The remainder of us followed Jess and the handful of villagers toward the far side of the clearing that surrounded the village. After crossing the clearing, we had gone but a short distance into the jungle when we came upon the form of a man lying upon the ground as though dead. That was our impression at first glance. A second glance, however, showed that the repose suggested calm sleep rather than death. We stood staring as though transfixed, for we saw that the figure lying on the ground was Jest. Suddenly, as Jest walked toward it, the figure became animated and rose to the standing position. As the figure and Jest stood face to face for an instant, there was no mistaking the identity. It was Jest. All saw that it was he. Then instantly the Jest we had known had disappeared, and there was but one figure standing before us. Of course, all this was accomplished in much less time than it takes to tell, and the wonder was that not one of us questioned. The 5 who had been left behind at camp came running without a signal from any of us. We afterwards asked them why they came. The answers were, "We don't know. The first we knew, we were all on our feet and running to you. We simply do not know why we did it. None of us recall any signal. We found ourselves running into your direction before any of us realized what we were doing." One of our number remarked, "My eyes are wide open, that I see far beyond the veil of death, and the wonders that stand revealed are beyond conception." Another said, "I see the whole world overcoming death." How vividly the words come back! The last enemy, death, shall be overcome. Is not this the fulfillment of these words? What pygmies are our mere intellects in comparison with this gigantic but simple understanding, and yet we have dared to look upon ourselves as giants of intellect. Why, we are mere babes. I just begin to see the meaning of "Ye must be born again." How true the words! I leave the reader to imagine our surprise or bewilderment. Here was a man with whom we had been in daily contact and by whom we had been served daily. that was able to lay his body down for the protection of others and go on and serve so very efficiently. Could it do otherwise than recall, "He that is greatest among you shall be servant or shall serve"? I think there was not one among us but from that moment lost all fear of death. These people are accustomed to laying a body down before a village in the jungle of a country infested with marauding men and animals, and that village is as safe from the ravages of men and animals as though it were in a civilized country. It was very evident that Jeff's body had been lying where we found it for a considerable time. The hair had grown long and bushy, and in it were the nests of a little bird peculiar to the country. These birds had built their nests, reared their young, and the young had flown away, thus giving unmistakable evidence of the time the body had been in the position and inactive. These birds are very timid and will abandon their nests at the slightest disturbance. This shows the great love and trust of the little birds. The excitement was so great that no one in our camp except Jest slept that night. He slept like a child. At intervals, one or another of our party would sit up and look over toward where Jest was sleeping, then lie down again, saying, "Pinch me to see if I'm really awake." Occasionally, a more forceful expression was used. Chapter 5. We were up at sunrise the next morning, and that day returned to the village where we had left our outfit. We arrived at the village just before dark and pitched our camp under the great banyan tree. The next morning Emil greeted us and we all began asking questions. He said, "I do not wonder at your questions, and I will gladly answer all that I can at this time, leaving others until you have gone further into your work. In talking to you as I am, you fully realize that I am using your language to convey to you the one great underlying principle of our belief. Then all know the truth, and it is rightly interpreted. Truly is it not, one and all from the same source? Are we not all one with the universe mind, substance, God? Are we not all one great family? Is not every child, every one born, no matter the caste or creed, a member of this great family? You ask if we believe death is avoidable. Let me answer in the words of the Siddha. The human body is built up from the individual cell, like the bodies of plants and animals, whom we love to call younger and less evolved brothers. The individual cell is a minute microscopic unit of the body. By a process of growth and division, repeated many times, this minute nucleus of a cell unit results at last in a complete human being, built up of almost countless millions of cells. These body cells specialize for certain different functions, but they retain, in the main, the characteristics of the individual cell whence they arose. This individual cell may be looked upon as a torch bearer of animate life. It passes on from generation to generation the latent fires of God, the vitality of all living beings, with an unbroken ancestry reaching back to the time when life first appeared on this planet. This individual cell has the property of unlimited youth. But what about the group cells called the body? The group cells arose from the individual cell repeated many times, retaining its individual characteristics, one of which is the latent fire of life, the eternal youth. The group cells or body function as guardian of the individual cell only during the short span of life as you know it now. The most ancient of our teachers by inspirational means perceived the truth of the fundamental unity of life reactions in plant and animal. We can well imagine these teachers beneath the spreading banyan addressing their pupil as follows: "Look at this giant tree, the vital process going on in our brother. This tree and ourselves is fundamentally the same. Behold the leaves and the buds at the tips of the oldest banyan. How young they are, young as the seed from which the giant sprang into life. The live reactions of plant and man being alike. Man can certainly profit by the experience of the plant. As the leaves and buds at the tips of the branches of the oldest banyan are young as the seed whence it sprang, even so the group cells in man forming his body need not gradually lose their vitality and die, but may grow young and evergreen as the ovum or individual cell itself. Indeed, there is no reason why your body should not grow as young and vital as the vital seed from which it sprang. The ever spreading banyan, always a symbol of everlasting life, does not die except through accident. No natural law of decay, no old age process seems to exist within the banyan tree to affect injuriously the vital energy of its cells. The same is true of the human form divine. There is no natural law of death or decay for man except through accident. No inevitable old age process exists within his body or group cells. Nothing can gradually paralyze the individual. Death is, then, an unavoidable accident. Disease is above all dis-ease. Absence of ease, or santi, sweet, joyous peace of the spirit reflected through the mind in the body. Senile decay, which is the common experience of man, is but an expression that covers his ignorance of cause. Certain disease, conditions of mind and body, even accidents are preventable by appropriate mental attitude. Says the Siddha, the tone of the body may be so preserved that it may naturally resist with ease infectious and other disease like plague and influenza. The Siddha may swallow germs and never develop disease at all. Remember that youth is God's seeds of love planted in the human form divine. Indeed, youth is the divinity within man. Youth is the life spiritual, the life beautiful. It is the only life that lives and loves, the one life eternal. Age is unspiritual, mortal, ugly, and real. Fear thoughts, pain thoughts, and grief thoughts create the ugliness called old age. Joyous thoughts, love thoughts, and ideal thoughts create the beauty called youth. Age is but a shell within which lies the gem of reality, the jewel of youth. Practice acquiring the consciousness of childhood. Visualize the divine child within. Before falling asleep, suggest to your consciousness, I now realize that there is within me a spiritual joy body ever young, ever beautiful. I have beautiful spiritual mind, eyes, nose, mouth, skin, the body of divine infant, which now tonight is perfect. We repeat this affirmation and meditate upon it quietly while falling asleep. Upon rising in the morning, suggest to yourself aloud, well, dear, addressing yourself by name, there is a divine alchemist within. By the spiritual power of these affirmations, during the night a transmutation takes place and unfolding from within. The spirit has saturated the spiritual body and spiritual temple. The inner alchemist has caused dead and worn out cells to fall and the gold of new skin to appear with perpetual health and loveliness. Truly divine love in the demonstration of eternal youth. This divine alchemist is within my temple, constantly coining new and beautiful baby cells. The spirit of youth is within my temple, this human form divine, and all is well. Santi, Santi, Santi. Peace, peace, peace. Learn to smile in the sweet way of a child. A smile from the soul is spiritual relaxation. A real smile is a thing of true beauty, the artistic work of the inner ruler immortal. It is well to affirm, I think, a kind of thought for all the world. May all the world be happy and blessed. Affirm before taking up the work for the day. Within me there is a perfect form, the form divine. I am now all that I desire to be. I visualize daily my beautiful being until I breathe it into expression. I am a divine child, all my needs, all being, now and forever supplied. Learn to thrill yourself. Affirm, infinite love fills my mind and thrills my body with its perfect life. Make everything bright and beautiful about you. Cultivate a spirit of humor. Enjoy the sunshine. You understand that I'm quoting from teaching of Siddha. They are the oldest teachers known, and their teaching antedates all history by thousands of years. They went about teaching the people and showing them the better way of life even before man knew the simple arts of civilization. It is from their teaching that the system of rulers sprang, but these rulers soon wandered away from the realization that it was God expressing through them, thinking it was themselves, the personal, who were doing the work. They lost sight of the spiritual and brought forth the personal of material, forgetting that all comes from one source, God. These rulers' personal concepts gave rise to a great separation in belief and the wide diversity of thought. This is our concept of the Tower of the Babel. The Siddha have preserved through the ages the true inspiration methods of God expressing through mankind and through all his creations, realizing that God is all and that is God manifesting through all. They have never deviated from this teaching. Thus they have preserved the great fundamental truth. Chapter 6. As we had considerable work to do before crossing the Himalayas, we decided upon this village as the most opportune place for our headquarters. The man we had left in the village to observe Emil joined us here and reported that he had conversed with Emil until nearly 4 o'clock of the day he was to keep his appointment with us. Then Emil said he was about to keep his appointment. His body immediately became inactive and reposed upon the couch as though asleep. It was in this position until about 7 o'clock in the evening, when it gradually became more indistinct and disappeared. It was at this time in the evening that Emil came to us in the lodge at the little village. The reason was not far enough advanced for us to attempt the mountain passes. You will note that I say for us. By this I mean the members of our little party, for by this time we had begun to look upon ourselves as mere impediments. We realized that our three great friends, you will note that I can call them all great, for indeed they were, could have negotiated the distance that we covered in far less time than it took us, but they were uncomplaining. We had made a number of short trips from our headquarters with either Jest or Napro accompanying us, and in every instance they had shown their sterling qualities and worth. On one of these trips Emil, Jest, and Napro accompanied us to the village where the temple called the Silence Temple. The temple was not made by hands, is located. This village contains a temple and the houses of the attendants and is located on the former site of the village that had been nearly destroyed by the ravages of wild animals and pestilence. We were told that the masters visited this spot and found a few inhabitants left of our 3,000 population. They ministered to them, and the ravages of the wild animals and the pestilence ceased. The few villagers vowed that if they were spared, they would from that time on devote their lives to God, serving Him in any way He chose. The masters left and when they returned later, they found the temple erected and the attendants in charge. The temple is very beautiful, situated on an elevation overlooking a wide expanse of country. It is about 6,000 years old, is made of white marble, and has never needed repairs as the piece chipped off replaces itself, as was proven by members of our party. Emil said, "This is called the Temple of Silence, the place of power. Silent is power, for when we reach the place of silence in mind, we have reached the place of power, the place where all is one, the one power, God. Be still and know that I am God. Diffused power is noise. Concentrated power is silence. When through concentration draw to a center, we have brought all of our forces into one point of force. We have contacted God in silence. We are one with Him, and hence one with all power. This is the heritage of man. I and the Father are one. There is must but one way to be one with the power of God, and that is consciously to contact God. This cannot be done in the without. For God manifests from within. The Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth keep silence before him. Only as we return from the without to the silence of the within can we hope to make conscious union with God. We will realize that his power is for us to use, and we will use it at all times. Then we will know that we are one with his power. Then will humanity be understood. Men will learn to let go of self-delusions and vanities. He will realize his ignorance and littleness. Then will he be prepared to learn. He will realize that the proud cannot be taught. He will know that only the humble can perceive the truth. His feet will feel the firm rock. He will no longer stumble. He will be poised in decision. To realize that God is the only power, substance, and intelligence may be confusing at first, but when man does realize the true nature of God and brings him forth into active expression, he will use this power at all times. He will know that he consciously contacts his power at all times. When he eats, when he runs, when he breathes, or when he does the great work before him. Man has not learned to do the greater works of God because he has not realized the greatness of God's power and has not known that God's power is for man's use. God does not hear us through our loud and vain repetitions, nor our much speaking. We must seek God through the Christ within, the invisible connection which we have within ourselves. When the Father within is worshipped in spirit and truth, he hears the calls of that soul which sincerely opens to him. The one who makes the connection with the Father in secret will feel the power flowing through him as the fulfillment of every desire. For he that sees the Father in the secret place of his own soul, and there abides, him the Father will reward openly. How often Jesus disclosed his individual contact with the Father. See how he constantly held himself in conscious communication with God within. See how he talked with him as though he were personally present. See how powerful the secret inner relation made him. He recognized that God does not speak in the fire, earthquake, or the great wind, but in the still small voice deep in our own souls. When man learns this, he will become poised. He will learn to think things through. Old ideas will drop away, new ideas will be adjusted. He will soon find the ease and efficiency of system. He will learn at last to take all the questions that perplexed him into the silent hour. There he may not solve them, but he will become familiar with them. Then he will not need to go hurrying and battling through the day and feel that his purpose has been defeated. If men could come to know the greater stranger himself, Let him enter his own closet and shut the door. There he will find his most dangerous enemy, and there will he learn to master him. He will find his true self. There will he find his truest friend, his wisest teacher, his safest adviser, himself. There he find the altar upon which God is the undying fire, the source of all goodness, all strength, all power himself. He will know that God is in the deepest part of the silence. He will find that within himself abides the Holy of Holies. He will feel and know that his every desire is in God's mind and is therefore God's desire. He will feel and know the closeness of the relationship of God and man, the Father and the Son. He will realize that only in consciousness has there been any separation of these which have seemed two, just as his spirit and his body have seemed to be two, but which in reality are one. God fills both heaven and earth. It was this great revelation that came to Jacob in the silence. He had slept on the stone of materiality. In a great burst of divine illumination, he saw the outer is but the outpressing or expression of the image held within. So impressed was he by this that he called out, "Surely the Lord, or law, is in this place, the earth or body, and I knew it not. This is none other but the house of God, and this is the gate to heaven." Man will realize, as Jacob said, that the real gate to heaven is through his own consciousness. It is this ladder of consciousness, revealed in a vision to Jacob, which each of us must climb before we can enter the silent secret place of the Most High and find that we are in the very center of every created thing, one with all things visible and invisible, in and of the omnipresence. In Jacob's vision he was shown the ladder reaching from the earth to heaven. He saw the angels of God descending and ascending upon it, God's ideas descending from spirit to form and ascending again. It was the same revelation that came to Jesus when the heavens were opened unto him, and he saw the wonderful law of expression whereby ideas conceived in the divine mind sum forth into expression and manifest as form. So perfectly was this law of expression revealed to the master that at once he saw all form may be transformed or changed in form through a change of consciousness in regard to it. His first temptation was to change the form of stones to that of bread to satisfy personal hunger. But when the revelation of this law of expression came, the true understanding that stores, as well as all other visible forms, have come forth from the universal mind substance, God, and are in themselves true expressions of divine mind, and all things desired, not formed, are still in this universal mind substance, ready to be created or brought forth to fill every desire. Thus the need for bread but showed that the substance that which to create bread or any other needed thing is at hand without limitation, and bread can be created from this substance just as well as stones can be created therefrom. Every good desire man has is God's desire. Therefore, there is an unlimited supply in the universal God substance all about us to fill every desire. All we need to do is to learn to use what God has already created for us. And this He wills to have us do that we may be free from every limitation and thus be abundantly free. When Jesus said, "I am the door," he meant that the "I am" in each soul is the door through which the life, power, and substance of the great I am, which is God, comes forth into the expression to the individual. This I am has but one mode of expression, and that is through idea, thought, word, and act. This I am God being, which is power, substance, intelligence, is given form by consciousness. And for this reason the Master said, according to your faith, be it unto you, and all things are possible to them that believe. Now we see that God is within the soul as power, substance, and intelligence, or in spiritual terms, wisdom, love, and truth, and is brought out into form or expression through consciousness. The consciousness which is in the infinite mind of God and in man is determined by the concept or belief that is held in mind. It is the belief in separation from spirit that has caused our forms to age and die. When we see that spirit is all and that form is constantly be expressed from spirit, then shall we understand that that which is born of or brought out of spirit is spirit. The next great truth to be revealed through this consciousness is that each individual, being a concept of the divine mind, is held in that mind as a perfect idea. Not one for us has conceived himself. We have been perfectly conceived and are always held in the perfect mind of God as perfect beings. By having this realization brought to our consciousness, we can contact the divine mind and so reconceive what God has already conceived for us. This is what Jesus called being born again. It is a great gift the silence has to offer us. For by contacting the God mind, we can think with God mind and know ourselves as we are in reality rather than as we have thought ourselves to be. We contact God mind through true thought and so bring forth a true expression. Whereas in the past, perhaps through untrue thought, we have brought forth an untrue expression. But whether the form be perfect or imperfect, the being of the form is perfect God power, substance, and intelligence. It is not the being of the form that we wish to change, but the form that being has assumed. This is to be done through the renewing of the mind, or through the change from the imperfect to the perfect concept, from the thought of man to the thought of God. How important then to find God, to contact Him, to be one with Him, and to bring Him forth into expression. How equally important is the silence or the stilling of the personal mind, that the God mind in all its splendor may illumine the consciousness. When it does, then we shall understand how the sun is righteousness, shall rise with the healing in his wings. The mind of God floods consciousness as sunshine floods a darkened room. The infusion of the universal mind into the personal mind is like the entrance of the vastness of the outside air into the impurity of that which has long been held in some closed compartment. It stands alone supreme, and we realize that we are to build one temple. The temple of the living God is the blending of the greater with the lesser through which the lesser becomes one with the greater. The impurity was caused by the separation of the lesser from the greater. The purity is caused by their union, so that no longer is there a greater and a lesser, but just one good, whole, pure air. Even so must we know that God is one, and all things visible and invisible are one with Him. It is separation from Him that had caused sin, sickness, poverty, and death. It is union with Him that causes one to become whole being or to become conscious of being whole. The separation from unity is the descent of the angels on the ladder of consciousness. The return to unity is the ascent of the angels upon the ladder. The descent is good, for unity then becomes expressed in diversity, but in diversity there need to be no concept of separation. That which is diversity has been misconceived from the personal or external viewpoint to be separation. The great work for each soul is to lift the personal viewpoint to such heights in consciousness that it becomes one with the whole. When all can meet with the one accord in one place, that place in consciousness where it is understood that all things visible and invisible have their origin in the one God, then we stand upon the Mount of Transfiguration. At first we see Jesus, and with him Moses and Elias, or law and prophecy, and the Christ, the power within man to know God. And we think to build three temples, but the deeper meaning comes. We are given to realize the immortality of man and to know that divinity is never lost, that divine man is deathless, eternal. Then Moses, the law, and Elias, the prophecy, disappear, and the Christ stands alone, supreme, and we realize that we have to build but one temple, the temple of the living God within our very selves. Then the Holy Spirit fills the consciousness, and the sense of delusions of sin, sickness, poverty, and death become no more. This is the great purpose of the silence, this temple from which we may chip a piece and the scar will be instantly healed, but typifies the temple of our body, of which Jesus spoke, the temple not made by hands, eternal in the heavens, which we are to bring forth here on earth. End of chapter